Hi, it's Ramsey Dewey with the JX Fight Club in Shanghai, China, and today we have an excellent question from our friend Carl Anderson, who asks, what steps should we take when training injured, if it's an injury that we can still train with, and also what steps should we take when training with an injured training partner? Okay, that's a great question because injuries happen a lot. In fact, they happen a lot more in training than they do in fighting. I mean, the most common injury in fighting is broken hands or bruised up hands, right? But in training, man, so many things happen. So many things happen all the time. Knee injuries, neck injuries, bumps and bruises. There's always going to be something wrong. But the great thing about mixed martial arts especially is that there's always a way to train around it. Now, we have to understand our limitations, of course. We have to understand our limitations. I remember when I was younger, I didn't understand my limitations, and so I overtrained. And I say overtrained in quotes like that because really what was going on is I didn't recover properly. I didn't pay attention to proper recovery. Because you can train a tremendous amount. You can do a tremendous workload if you recover properly, if you pay attention to good recovery, okay? That means things like sleep well, work out the tension in the muscles, good diet, nutrition, get enough food, water in your system. And there are a bunch of other things that go into recovery as well, but predominantly that. If we're doing those things, the workload we can do is tremendous. A lot more than I used to think it was. So right now, I'm doing a lot more than I used to do when I overtrained. Okay? And I see this a lot. I've got a friend who, he's a really good grappler. I mean, he started jiu-jitsu a few years ago, and he got really excited about it, started training every day, multiple times a day. He's a purple belt now. And he's done all these competitions. He's won a bunch of gold medals in a bunch of tournaments. And he loves jiu-jitsu so much. He's so excited about it, but he fell into that overtraining trap, and now he's dealing with some nerve damage. Okay? And, that sucks because when you push yourself to that point where you can't train anymore, then you got to take a bunch of time off in order to get back to even so that you can even go back to the gym. So we want to take care so that that doesn't happen, okay? So that our recovery is on point, so that we can get back in the gym and do it again day after day after day, even if we're dealing with an injury. Now, the type of injury is going to determine the answer to that question, very much so. So if I have, say, a sprained ankle, right, it's going to be very difficult to work my boxing and my kickboxing and my stand-up game and my wrestling, because all that stuff requires functioning feet. And if my ankle is all jacked up, well, all that type of training is going to make it worse, but there's still a lot I can do. I mean, I can work my jiu-jitsu, I can work my guard, I can do all of these things that don't put any stress on the feet at all, as long as my partner's not doing toe holds on me. So if you are in that situation where you got a sprained ankle, for example, well, roll and let your partners know, I have a sprained ankle. Maybe avoid those toe holds if you can help it. And at the same time, obey rule number one of all fighting, which is protect yourself intelligently at all times. Okay, so if you're going to roll with somebody and they might go for a toe hold, get that tapping hand ready and tap before it hurts, before you have to. Okay? I mean, what other kinds of injuries do I see a lot? I mean, a lot of people jack up their elbows, especially when they're starting jiu-jitsu, because they don't tap early and they don't tap often. And they try to fight through every single submission like there's a UFC title on the line. And so, like, people will get armbarred and they'll wait for their arm to get hyperextended and pop and snap and crackle before they tap, because it didn't hurt yet. Well, guess what? Now it's going to hurt for a while. So, and I see the same thing with people throwing punches. They'll lock their arms, they'll lock and hyperextend the arm when they throw the punch, and then they'll armbar themselves. And so I see a lot of people that happens, and it's not the worst injury, but they let it hold them back, and they stop coming to class until it feels better. And one of the worst things we can do, if we have an injury we can work around, is to stop, is to lie down and sleep it off until we feel better, because you know what, we won't. You know, last time I had a major surgery, I was like 22, maybe 23 years old, I don't remember, early 20s, but I had this major surgery. They cut my abdomen open, took my guts out, stapled them back together or something like that, put me back in one piece, and then put staples in me. So I was being held together with staples, and just doing any movement at all, breathing was very painful. But after about 2 days of lying in the bed thinking, I'm going to lie here for months until I feel better, well, the doctors came in and said, all right, get up. I was like, no, my intestines are being held in my abdominal cavity by surgical staples. I'm not moving. And they told me, well, modern medical science tells us that movement is good for recovery. And I'll tell you, that was one of the most painful things I ever had to do, was get up out of bed and walk around with surgical staples in my stomach 2 days after a major surgery like that. But man, if modern medical science thinks it's that important to move, we better start paying attention. Why? Why is it so important to move when we want to recover, right? Now, I mentioned sleeping and eating right are important for recovery, but also moving. If you're really sore after a workout, how do we recover from that? Do we sleep it off? You ever hear the day after leg day people always talk about? Where they're really sore, the day after leg day, where they're extra super sore because they didn't do any moving the day after leg day because they were sore and it hurt to move, and so they didn't move, and now they're more sore. Here's a pro tip, guys. If every day is the day after leg day, then no day is the day after leg day. Squat every day, Bulgarian method, guys. Your legs will never feel sore because they're always sore. But that's besides the point. That's beside the point. Where was I going with that? Something about recovery. Oh yeah, moving. So if you get really sore after a workout, what's the best thing to do? Get up and move, right? If you're sore the day after leg day, go on a walk and move those legs and get the blood flowing. Because when the blood flows, it takes the acid out of your muscles that's making you sore. It flushes that away, cleans it out, and it brings nutrients into the muscles to help them repair and grow and get better. Okay, so movement is absolutely key for recovery. And the same thing with an injury. Now, if I got a sprained ankle, I don't want to walk around on that sprained ankle and make it worse, but what I do want to do is move in the ways that I can that won't aggravate the injury. Another injury I see a lot in combat sports is bruised up ribs. Cause sometimes we don't breathe correctly when we take a knee to the guts or a shovel hook or something like that, or we're doing jiu-jitsu or wrestling and we land wrong on a takedown, or we're not breathing right when somebody goes knee mount or something like that, and we get bruised up here. And a lot of people, the day after that happens, they're really sore, everything hurts, they're very sensitive in the guts, and so they don't come to class because they think, oh, I don't want to make that worse. But again, in that situation, moving is one of the most important things you can do. Now, obviously, you don't want to take repeated shovel hooks and knees in the guts, when you got bruised up ribs, but there are all kinds of ways you can train around that. Basically, train some other part of your game, right? So if you got cauliflower ear, big inflammation in the ear, something like that. I see this a lot. People, their ears swell up and get really sensitive, or they just had a drain and they don't want to wrestle and put their head against somebody else's head and risk aggravating that. Well, guess what? There are a million other things you can do. You can practice your hand fighting. You can practice, sequences and drills and stuff that don't involve scraping your ear against the other guy. Or get ear guards or a head guard or something like that. Man, knee injuries, all the time. People have knee injuries. It can range anywhere from minor to recovering from ACL surgery or something like that. But if you got a knee injury, one of the smartest things you can do is wear knee sleeves. I mean, really, it offers support. It keeps your knees and your ligaments warm, and warm muscles and a warm body is much less likely to get injured and torn than a cold one. So make sure to pay attention to your warm-ups, right? Get that body warmed up before you put violent stress on it. Anyway, that's about it, really. Just be smart. If you're injured in one part of the body, train a different part of the body, right? If one particular activity and training is going to aggravate something, focus on a different activity in training, okay? Because there's always something you can do at the gym, always. I mean, I had a friend, he was a great fighter, and he got just catastrophically injured in the upper body. I don't remember exactly what was wrong. He like broke his shoulder and broke his arm, and the other arm was broken, or his neck was all jacked up. I don't remember, it was a car crash or something like that. But his legs were fine. So you know what he did? He went to the gym and got on a stationary bike and pedaled that bike, and he recovered a whole lot faster than the doctors told him he probably would. Why? Because he got that blood flowing. He got the nutrients coming into the injured areas, so he healed faster. One of my old coaches, my good friend Shane Brenner, he tore his ACL in a fight. And, you know, that's a rough situation. It's hard to come back from a torn ACL, but he did. And I'll tell you what he did. You know, a couple days after the incident, you know, he called me up on the phone and said, "Hey, come over here." So I went over to his house, and, you know, he's lying in bed. He's all strung up in bed, unable to move. But he asked me to hang a pull-up bar up next to his bed and help like jury rig this rope next to his bed so he can climb up the rope and get onto the pull-up bar and do pull-ups. He's like, "My leg doesn't work, but my arms do." And so every day he would do pull-ups. He'd climb out of bed on that rope, do the pull-ups, climb back into bed on the rope, you know, rest, recover a little bit. You know, whenever he was bored, he'd get up, do the pull-ups, and you know, he couldn't use the leg, but man, he had a strong upper body, and he just made that stronger and stronger and stronger. And again, as a result, he ended up recovering a whole lot faster than the doctors speculated that he would. Why? Because he got the blood flowing, and that is so important to do when we have an injury. So again, he wasn't doing anything with his knee. He couldn't. I mean, that would have just made it worse. After surgery, man, you don't want to mess around with that. You got to let it heal. But there's so many other things we can do. Right? If your leg's broken, work your arms. If your arm's broken, work your legs. Low-high principle right there. All right, thanks for the question. Thanks for listening. Now get out there and train.